Hey guys, so these are the underglazes up here that we have. And again, this is the tile board, so how we pick out the colors that we want. Underglazes are very close to what they look like here in the bottles, and is very close to what they look like when they're finished. So that's one of the really nice things about underglazes is you can kind of see what you're getting all along through the process, as opposed to glazes, which a lot of times don't look anything like the finished result when they're done being fired. So underglazes come in these little jars. For application is typically painting by hand for the most part in this studio, pretty much solely. That's how we apply these. So we're painting these on with a brush, okay? So underglazes for this first project, I recommend picking two glazes or an underglaze and a glaze, and then keeping it slow and simple, and then expanding from there once you have some experience. Okay. So for this pot, I chose medium blue, which is a pretty dark blue. And I'm just going to coat this whole pot in the medium blue. Okay, underglazes are can be a little bit pricey. They're a little bit pricey. So for a pot like this, I'm going to leave the bottom of this a little bit exposed, or the underglaze exposed, not covered with glaze. So I'm putting my first coat on this whole pot, but I'm going to be a little bit thoughtful in how I apply this, as in I don't need to do, because I'm going to have glaze over most of the body of this, I'm not going to put two coats over everything, but I am going to put two coats over the bottom part because that's going to be exposed. I'm also not going to underglaze the inside because it's not super necessary. But again, because I'm going to leave the bottom of this a little bit, or the bottom of this, I'm going to have the underglaze exposed. I'm going to do a second coat on here just so that it doesn't look streaky or blotchy. Okay, so I'm kind of going over like the bottom inch of this or so. Give it a good two coats. But I'm just being strategic with how much I use and the consumption of this, because these are a little bit expensive. Okay, so for this first project, I am going to do a base coat of medium blue on the whole pot, the bottom, not the inside, but all the sides. And then I'm going to just use one glaze on this. So I'm just using Colonial White, which I think will be really nice. So I'm doing the inside first, and then I'm going to do the outside. I did two coats of the medium blue on the bottom, but I did one on everything else because it's going to be underneath the layer of Colonial White. So I wanted to make sure that this is nicely coated. We talked about in the glazing video about pouring on here. So especially because of the way that this is geometrically proportioned, I'm going to pour this on here in a specific way. So I'm going to pour this on so it kind of arcs down the side of this. And with pouring, we want to go kind of fast. So you can see how I got that on here. I'm going to hang that for a second to let it dry so it doesn't drip. And now you can see I've got these little arcs at the top, which I think are fun parts of the design. I can flip this over now, and you can see. So it has the bottom exposed, which shows off that underglaze. Also, as we talked about, when the glaze melts, it usually breaks on ridges. So the glaze might thin out a little bit on the lip up top, the rim, and these edges and the handles. So you might see a little bit of the blue underneath the white in a subtle way, which might be really nice and beautiful. Also, we talked about in the glazing video, the last thing you should always do when glazing a pot is wipe the bottom. With this one right here, I just painted that underglaze on. So if I wipe this, I might wipe the underglaze off. I will wipe some of the underglaze off. But if I have glaze on there, I need to get it off of there. So I will have to wipe this. This looks pretty okay. I have a little spot, just a little, it was a little drip. I can wipe that off with my finger. But if I have to wipe this with a sponge, that's fine. You will wipe some of the underglaze off. But then we'll just go back and touch up that underglaze, but we got to get that glaze off of there. Okay, so I didn't need to wipe this with a sponge, so it's okay. I'm going to stick this right into the kiln, but again, if you need to wipe that bottom, clean off any glaze that got on there, just touch it up. So just like the glazing video, if you guys are ready to have something fired, you want to put it on any of these shelves over here in the kiln room, and that tells me you want it fired. Okay, be careful of other people's stuff around here that you don't break things, especially if there's like a tight fit between two other things. Make sure you move slowly and don't bang each other's pots. This one I'm gonna put right in, and let's see how this looks in a couple days from now. So here we are a couple days later, and there she is. Let's check this baby out. Okay, so here's our underglazed pot, underglazed and glazed. Come on, baby. So that is a kiln stilt. Oops, sometimes they break. And that helps the pots to not fuse to the shelf. Even with the underglaze, sometimes there's a little bit of sticking. So I put everything on kiln stilts. So they do break, and that's fine. Always want to be careful on the bottoms of those little bits right there. Those are sharp. Those can be razor sharp. So always want to check and sand your stuff down. Sometimes I'll even just on the table just kind of grind it down a little bit and break those things off of there. Just to start to make sure that I don't get cut. So there's a little dirt, but that'll wipe right off of there. So here's my underglaze mug. So you can see how the glaze, how I poured it, adds a little like decorative element to this. You can see the medium blue underglaze that's exposed, that's not covered by glaze. Is really a darker color, and how it's softened up here, the blue, by the colonial white glaze that I chose as the overlayer. So the underglaze is underneath and the glaze is over the top. You can see on the inside the colonial white, where there's no underglaze, it's really white, and on the rim, but how it thinned out a little bit as it melted into some of these pores. It's a little bit darker in there, so you can really see the 3D printed modeling on here. So yeah, here's my mug. I'm not super happy with it, but it is nice. I'd probably want to do this again and take this a little bit further, but pretty good. And really quick, some bonus footage of these other two pots. I did these actually a while ago, but I brought them out just to show some alternate underglaze and glaze pots. So here's a bigger mug and on the right over here, and a vase, 2 cylinder forms that have been carved a whole lot, and then underglazed and glazed with Castile blue. So it's one of the glazes we have. And so especially that red, how the glaze really melts into those carved grooves and breaks on the edges, so it really kind of showcases that form all the way around. So just two other examples of what we did there with the different glaze. So that the colonial white on this one, and then the Castile blue on this one, and how the glaze breaks and kind of showcases some of the underglaze underneath the underlayer. All right, guys, let's do this.